This program contains adult content.
Is there a God?
Big atheist.
Really?
What am I, an idiot? Come on.
That yes, it would be nice if you could throw your sins and your responsibilities on someone else. But it's not true.
It looks like far-left lunacy.
I don't believe that it's true that religion is moral or ethical.
You don't need to follow anybody!
It's not human intelligence!
If someone doesn't value logical consistency, what logical argument are you going to give them that will demonstrate that they should?
Welcome to the show, Rebels. This is episode 156. Today is Thursday, May 11. I am the bearded ginger ninja Dan Ellis. The four-eyed wonder firefighter is not here, nor is the resident misanthrope. Mr. Firefighter is off doing overtime tonight. Mr. Misanthrope is out trying to be not so misanthropic. He's visiting relatives, I believe.
Oh.
But I am joined in studio by the wonderful Mr. Grant Larimer, a.k.a. the Purple Dragon. How are you tonight, Grant?
I am good. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. My voice is a little gone-ish.
Why is that? What's going on?
I think it's just allergies.
Oh.
Postnasal drip.
Too much gas.
That kind of... Maybe. Just change of the seasons, being tired. I don't know. Yeah. It's all kinds of stuff, man.
Yeah.
But Ryan sent me a message the other day saying that his voice was gone. And so there's that. And then I can't remember if it was later that day or the next day. He said, oh, and by the way, I can't make it to the show because he was basically voluntold that he's got to work overtime.
Oh, okay. Because
he's sick, but, you know, he lives at the fire station when he's working, and so they all get sick if one of them gets sick.
Yeah.
And so they had a bunch of guys call out, and he had to fill in for guys who are more sick than he is, I guess.
Let's hope he doesn't have to give, like, mouth-to-mouth to somebody.
Well, they have those, don't they have things now that you put it over the face?
Yeah, they're the mouth prophylactic these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mouth prophylactic.
That's a mouth rubber. Isn't
it like a rubber bottle?
Oh,
kind of thing,
they have the rubber
bottle
bottle.
that you put over the face.
They have the rubber bottle thing.
Right.
But they also have this like mouth prophylactic, this rubber thing that you put over for mouth to mouth. That you just put over so you're not like touching skin to skin. But you're still like blowing air into them, so I don't know.
And hoping nothing comes out when you're...
apparently, yeah.
Huh. Well, on tonight's show, we will be interviewing Mr. Lloyd Evans. He is senior editor of jwsurvey.org. He's going to be telling us all about Jehovah's Witnesses, which is good because I know jack and shit about Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, all I know is what the people on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. when they knock on my door, what they tell me.
Well, I had my ex-wife's sister married a Jehovah's Witness, and I remember that. So my ex-wife's sister's husband was a nice guy, but he was, I don't know, a little weird, a little strange.
He's a Jehovah's.
And we all called him a Jack Joe because he would drink and he'd party, and he allowed his wife to have a Christmas tree as long as it wasn't somewhere in the house that his mother would easily spot it if she came over to spend any bit of time with them.
Well, how magnanimous of him.
Yes, he was
I know.
Quite lovely that way.
What a nice guy.
And his mother, I believe, developed breast cancer, and I can't remember if there was something about she had to have surgery and they were worried about needing a blood transfusion and
I mean, usually when you get surgery, you need blood.
And I think, and I could be wrong, but I think that the Jehovah's Witnesses can store their own blood for later transfusion if they know they've got I don't know. We'll have to find out.
Yeah.
We'll have to ask Lloyd.
I would think so, but yeah, I'm not sure how.
It's your job to remind me when we interview Lloyd to ask him this question.
Because my memory is so good.
You have to remember.
I can't remember my daughter's names half the time.
I'm sure we could Google it and look it up if we happen to forget, but yeah. I remember her getting breast cancer, and I don't know, there's some vague memory of that being a thing that can be done.
So, I mean, how does that work during surgery? I mean, you have like some kind of like oil drip pan under the bed that, you know, like the blood drips down and then it cycles back up into.
No, if you know that you have some kind of surgery coming up, you go and you have blood drained off ahead of your surgery.
Oh, okay.
So.
But then you have to wait for the surgery for the blood to replenish itself.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's why you go. So. Well, that's why you go.
You would have to go
before the surgery. Yeah.
I wonder how that works. Yeah, we should ask.
Well, because you can donate like once a week or something like that.
I don't
typically. I think.
No, not once a week. You could do plasma very frequently.
Plasma you can do a couple times a week, 2 or 3 times, I think.
I'm not sure you can do blood. I'm not sure a pint of blood. Because the pints, all they take at any given time, and you only have 8 pints.
You know what I love about this show? Is that when we don't know jack shit about something, we just start making guesses.
Just make shit up.
I'm pretty sure that's how it works. That sounds about right. Sure. We could look it up, but why bother with that?
It's not like, we'd have to pull out our computers or something.
Yeah, like the one that's sitting right in front of me. That'd be.
But, where's the fun in that?
Much better to just fly by the seat of our pants. Well, shall we,
It's alternative facts.
Well, I know he's, so Lloyd's in Croatia.
Wow.
And so there's a bit of a time difference there.
I bet.
Yeah.
I would think so.
Yeah, so.
I think I played chess with somebody from Croatia.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
In Croatia or just online?
Just on one of these like mobile apps.
Okay.
The little flag popped up and it said Croatia. So, chess is kind of like the universal game. It's.
Oh, well, how long is your Jehovah's Witness story you wanted to tell?
It's fairly short. It's a few minutes, a couple of minutes.
You want to do it now or after the interview?
It's up to you. You're the.
Well, let's do it.
You're the podcast god here.
Let's do it. Well, so that we can get him on the phone, let's do it after the interview.
Okay.
And then we'll also know how much time we've got left for stuff.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get Lloyd on the phone.
All right.
We'll be right back. Okay. On the line with us now, we have Mr. Lloyd Evans. He is author of The Reluctant Apostate and senior editor at jwsurvey.org. How are you tonight, Lloyd?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've wanted to speak with somebody who is an ex-Jehovah's Witness for so long, and one of our listeners was kind enough to refer you to us, and you contacted us, and so it's an absolute delight to have you on the show. I know next to nothing about Jehovah's Witnesses other than the little bit that I've read online. So tell us. I was going to say,
I'm here to help if I can.
Oh, excellent. So with me in studio is a co-host who appears regularly when we need somebody to fill in for us.
I'm always happy to be here.
Kind enough to do that. So my name is Dan Ellis. In studio, I have Grant Larimer with me, otherwise known as the Purple
Grant.
Dragon.
Nice to meet you, Lloyd.
So tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into some of the work that you've been doing. You live in Croatia. Are you an expat?
Yes, I am. I was born in the UK. I grew up not far from Manchester. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. I took the religion very, very seriously as a child. My parents certainly took it very seriously. In fact, I can remember them telling me that they didn't expect me to start high school because they thought Armageddon was going to come before that happened. So
what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why have an education when the world's going to be destroyed? So that was kind of the whole vibe when I was growing up, and. But by the time I was about 19 or 20, I was already starting to wake up. There were things that just weren't making sense to me. But when I was 21, my mother died of breast cancer, and that just kind of completely turned my world upside down. And the thing you have to remember is that for Jehovah's Witnesses, they are led to believe that the only way that they can see their loved ones again is to be as close to the organization as possible. They're effectively told, well, your mother isn't quite dead. She's still alive in Jehovah's memory. And if you want to see her again, you have to, be a good Jehovah's Witness. So that's precisely what I did. And I put all of my doubts to one side. But they obviously didn't go away completely. And through a strange set of circumstances, I found myself moving to Croatia when I was 30. And as a result of moving to a different country, I was suddenly unplugged from the constant indoctrination. So I was going to meetings at the congregation in Croatia, and all of the talks were in Croatian. And I just suddenly, it was literally like the scene in The Matrix where they unplug you. And I found myself asking, what do I really believe? What are my actual authentic beliefs? And that's when I kind of realized that I wasn't really a Jehovah's Witness in my heart. So it kind of went from there, really. There's a lot more I could tell you about the whole process of leaving, but that's the basic gist.
So is the rest of your family still Jehovah's Witnesses, practicing? Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have a sister. I don't believe she goes. My understanding is that she doesn't go to meetings anymore. But I'm basically being shunned by her and my dad. It's particularly difficult with my dad because my dad's actually an elder in the religion. And so he obviously has all sorts of reasons why he has to keep me at arm's length. But what's really sad is that I have a 3-year-old daughter, my wife and I. In fact, it was having a daughter that kind of really made us decide that we wanted to completely leave the religion rather than just kind of fade away. And our daughter still hasn't met her grandfather. Such is the extent of the shunning. So
that's unfortunate. Yeah, so shunning is part of what people within the religion do, right? For apostates, that they are just completely cut off from family and friends who are in the church.
Yeah, so a Jehovah's Witness will tell you that it doesn't have to be shunning. They'll say that you can just become inactive. But if you are inactive, which is another word for being inactive, is perhaps fading, what you're basically doing is you're taking a vow of silence. So you're basically promising that you'll never speak out against the organization, you'll never criticize it. And that was something that I was basically doing for a while. I mean, I set up jwsurvey.org when I was still technically a witness, but I was very, very careful to keep my identity secret. So I operated under a pseudonym, John Cedars, which is still the name of my YouTube channel. And I was just very, very careful. But like I say, they just reached a point for both myself and my wife where we thought, no, that's not enough. We really need to kind of separate ourselves from this religion because we have a child on the way and we don't want our believing witness family to have any excuse to try to indoctrinate our child into the religion. We want a completely blank canvas. And so because of that, I mean, my wife has contact with her parents, so it's not total shunning, but there are complicated reasons for that. But as far as the witness religion is concerned, it's very much a case that if you leave the religion either through being disfellowshipped due to some kind of perceived sin, or because you've disassociated or you've resigned as a witness, the penalty is shunning. And shunning goes as far as not even emailing someone who has left.
So when you say witness, you've mentioned the term witness a number of times. Is that just a pseudonym for just follower? Is that what you call a Jehovah's Witness follower?
Oh, I just kind of use witnesses shorthand for Jehovah's Witnesses. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you said that you moved to Croatia when you were 30. And so I assume that you set up JW Survey after that because you said you were still practicing. How long have you been out of the church, or how long has JW Survey been around?
Okay, so I moved to Croatia in 2009. It was actually in September of 2009. And I've since figured out, I mean, it seemed like it was longer, but I've since figured out that within 4 months, I was kind of waking up. In fact, within 4 months, I'd written a letter to my wife saying, you know, I think I'm going to be leaving the religion. It kind of created almost like an existential crisis for me. Oh, wow. Because when your entire life has been defined by your beliefs, and when you've got married to somebody under the assumption that you'll remain within that religion, it causes a few problems, as you can imagine. But I just decided that I was going to, I couldn't live a lie anymore. And I felt that I needed to, at the very least, stop attending meetings and stop doing the preaching work. And when I made that conscious decision, I kind of decided I kind of decided to myself that there was nothing stopping me anymore from going on so-called apostate resources, because when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you are basically trained to be terrified of anything that criticizes the religion. So literally, when you go on the internet and you're looking at a web page that you identify as apostate, that it's like a very visceral churning in your stomach, and you're thinking, you know, I'm going to get struck down by lightning or something. It's that severe. So I kind of went through that process, and what I found was kind of what I'd suspected all along, which was that the fear was just there to stop you from figuring out the truth, and that actually, although there is some nonsense on apostate websites, it's not all factual and it's not all logical. But, you know, if you go on the right websites and on the very well researched websites, it's totally damning. And it makes total sense. And, what I started doing was kind of writing about what I was learning and compiling my research. And then finally I, ended up starting up JW Survey. And how that happened was I thought, well, I'd like to know what other people in my position are thinking. I'd like to know how many other people are in my position and what their opinions are. And wouldn't it be great if we could have some kind of survey so that people could kind of answer questions and we could just see at a glance what people's feelings are on these issues? And someone completely out of the blue, who was an ex-JW, just approached me and said, listen, I'll build you a website and we'll do the survey. And so I'd never met this guy before. And I just figured, what have I got to lose? You know, he's offering to build me a website.
Right. Yeah.
We'll see what happens. And so that's how jwsurvey.org got started. And since then we've done a global survey every year, and up to about 6,000 people a year are taking the survey and basically participating and saying what they think is wrong about the religion.
So what types of questions are on the survey? And has it remained the same throughout the years, or have you, I'm guessing you've tweaked some things, added some questions? Does it follow a basic format?
It's basically grown in the number of questions, because each year when we're compiling the results, we'll think, actually, this will be a really interesting question to ask, you know. So, for example, the more we learn about the mishandling of child abuse, for example, I mean, that's kind of like an issue that's constantly evolving. And we're kind of very quickly realizing that the amount of abuse of children that goes on within the religion is kind of unprecedented. So, you know, wouldn't it be useful if we could add a question where we're asking whether people taking the survey have got any knowledge of child abuse or perhaps have been abused themselves. So those are kind of things that get added over time. And so, yeah, we've just recently, in the last couple of weeks, launched the 2017 survey, and it's already got 600 people have taken part just in the last couple of weeks. So it's definitely something that people can identify with.
So what do you, when you compile these results, each year, do you compile them into some kind of formal report? And what level of interest do you get in whatever these results are? I mean, is like any major media outlets or anything like that, do they pick this up or do anything with it?
Yeah, we do try and publish them, as best we can. I mean, none of us have got kind of any kind of formal training in conducting surveys, and we kind of make that abundantly clear when we're, in the disclaimer when we're writing it. But you ask a very good question, and this is actually very useful information. But the sad thing is that the media, I would say, is largely disinterested in what's going on with Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, you do get the occasional article that picks up on the child abuse. You do get the occasional article that picks up on blood transfusions and that kind of thing. But compared to the interest that's devoted to smaller groups like Scientology or maybe even the Westboro Baptist Church, there's really very little exposure given to Jehovah's Witnesses, which is ironic because the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses is constantly telling the followers that, Satan's system is out to get the Jehovah's one true faith, and they should avoid everything that's in the media because the media is totally biased. But the actual truth of the matter, once you wake up from that indoctrination, is that you realize that actually the media isn't really that interested in Jehovah's Witnesses. They tend to focus on easier targets.
Yeah, more popular targets.
Catholic Church.
Yeah. A lot of the other religions are a very target-rich environment because there are so many. I'm hearing a lot of parallels between the Jehovah's Witness Church and the Mormon or Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Church. We live here in Utah. I was raised LDS. Grant has never been LDS, but has
a lot of experience with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of response do you typically get to the survey? You said that you've already had 600 responses. What is a typical number of responses that you'll get throughout the year?
Well, it's kind of been going up and up, and then last year, I think we had 6,000 odd responses in 2015, and then last year I think we only got 4,000, but that was kind of really my fault because I was too busy getting my book finished and I wasn't promoting it as much as I would like. But for 2017, we've actually taken on a dedicated survey editor who's going to be responsible for kind of, attracting interest and compiling the results and that kind of thing. That's the beauty really of the website, is that it started off being just me, basically. Mm-hmm. And the team has since grown so that, we've now got an editor and an assistant editor and someone, as I say, who's focused purely on the survey. Because the simple truth is that there's an awful lot of work, not just with compiling the survey, but also we do regular articles on what's going on within the Jehovah's Witness world. And then there's also the people emailing in and, because they obviously read what we're writing and they identify with it and they want to share their story. So there's actually more work really than we can handle, bearing in mind that it's just a not-for-profit website. So.
Do you have any way of validating that the respondents on the survey are actually former Jehovah's Witnesses? Or, I mean, it seems like that would probably be hard to do, but is there any way of doing that?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I was questioning too. Is it just former J-dubs that are doing this, or is it current members also?
So we allow former Jehovah's Witnesses, current Jehovah's Witnesses, those, and we also allow those who've not been baptized as Jehovah's Witnesses, because you have to remember that, that there are people who are growing up in Jehovah's Witness families who just haven't been baptized yet. So
when do you get baptized? I'm sorry.
Well, you can get baptized as young as 8 or 9 as a Jehovah's Witness, and from the point you're baptized, you're basically locked into the religion.
Yeah.
So that's when you become liable for shunning, basically, if you go back on your baptism decision. I was actually baptized at the age of 11, and obviously I was held to that decision, right through to my 30s. So, but no, with the survey, we run it on surveymonkey.com. So, there's some nice infrastructure there to make sure that it isn't abused too much. But for the most part, we just have to recognize when we're writing our results that these are people who identify as Jehovah's Witnesses, and we have no means of independently verifying that. But these are people who profess to be Jehovah's Witnesses.
So tell us a little bit about the faith. I know that it was started in the 1800s. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it started off as the Bible students. Started off by a chap named Charles Taze Russell, who formed a Bible study group. He kind of was very heavily influenced by Adventist preachers. And if you know about Adventism, you know about the Great Disappointment in 1844, when they thought the end of the world was coming. And that whole movement spurned a string of preachers who became obsessed with end time predictions and trying to find verses in the Bible that would give an actual date for the apocalypse. Mm-hmm. And one of these guys was named Nelson Barber, and he heavily influenced Charles Taze Russell in making a prediction that the end of the world was going to come in 1914. So 1914 would usher in Armageddon, and obviously that didn't happen. But the successors of Russell were able to kind of tweak things slightly, and they said, well, it wasn't the end of the world that came in 1914. 1914 was just when Jesus came down to earth and when Jesus started ruling in heaven. And a few years later was when he chose the Watchtower Society to be his earthly organization. So that's basically the start of it. And it was, originally it was the Bible students, and the Bible students are actually a different religion. You can actually still meet Bible students today, but in I'm trying to get my dates right now. I think it was 1935, the religion changed its name to Jehovah's Witnesses, and the guy who invented the name Jehovah's Witnesses was Joseph Rutherford, and he was a very, very colourful character. In fact, if you can compare Jehovah's Witnesses with Scientology, Charles Taze Russell was like the L. Ron Hubbard, and Joseph Rutherford was like the David Miscavige. He was the real kind of nasty piece of work who kind of really stamped his authority and had a very kind of despotic side to him. So he kind of fashioned Jehovah's Witnesses into pretty much the religion we have today. And then it was his successor, Nathan Knorr, who took it from just a few 100,000 to literally millions, like a household brand around the world. So it's grown it's changed quite substantially over the years. And I would say that even in just a few short years since I've left, the organization's changed again. So there's lots of things about, Jehovah's Witnesses in 2017 that are unrecognizable from when I stopped attending meetings in 2010. But that's just the nature of it. It's constantly changing.
This is Matt Dillahunty, and you're listening to the Godless Revolution.
It seems to me that those people who have their faith, who believe so strongly in God, if they really believe strongly their God, they believe they're right, they believe that they occupy the moral high ground, they should be only too willing to sit down and put this not to the scientific test, but to the political moral discussion test of talking about why they believe what they believe? Are you up to the task of explaining to the rest of us who don't have your hotline to God why you're right?
Rejoining the Godless Rebelution podcast now.
So it's interesting. So you brought up the 1914 thing, and I was skimming over some information earlier today about Jehovah's, and 1914 kept coming up as this really relevant event of when Jesus established God's kingdom in heaven. And I'm like, what the hell's up with 1914? I mean, what is so relevant about what happened in 1914 that God all of a sudden decided to do this?
Okay, so we need to go back to Charles Taze Russell and his fixation with end time chronology, and around that time, as I say, people were frantically trying to kind of somehow connect the Bible verses with modern events and trying to kind of like almost establish a foothold for Bible chronology in modern times. And one scripture that people began focusing on was a scripture in Daniel chapter 4, which talks about an immense tree, a tree that can be seen from all the corners of the earth, which incidentally proves that, you know, the Bible writers had a flat earth in mind. But in this prophecy, the tree gets cut down and a band gets put around the tree to stop it from growing, and it's left for 7 times. Now, in the verse, the explanation is given that this prophecy is supposed to apply to King Nebuchadnezzar, and he's supposed to go crazy for 7 times. We don't know how long 7 times is, but that's just the time that's given. And then after these 7 times, his kingdom is to be given back to him. And that's the explanation that's given in the verse. It actually says all of this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. But what the Bible students did, and what Charles Taze Russell did, is they said, well, maybe this actually had a higher meaning, and maybe we can actually assign a number to these 7 times. And maybe these 7 times stretched from when the last king ruled in Judah through to the arrival of the kingdom. So they assigned the number 2,520, in other words, 2,520 years. And they said that this time began in 606 BCE, later changed to 607 BCE, which they claim to be the date for the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. But since then, we found out that that date is completely bogus.
Really?
Yeah. But anyway, they basically extrapolated from that 606 BCE. They extrapolated 1914 and said, well, this is when Armageddon's going to come, basically. And like I say, when that didn't happen, they kind of had to change things around and say, well, actually, it wasn't Armageddon that came. It was that Jesus started ruling in heaven invisibly. Quite convenient that it was invisible, because then no one needs to confirm it. And that's basically where Jehovah's Witnesses get 1914 from.
Okay.
Well, and they've had, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm under the assumption that they have had, throughout the history of the church, several different years in which they thought Armageddon was coming. Is that true?
Correct. Yeah. So the first of all, like I say, they said that Armageddon was going to come in 1914. And it's actually interesting because I've now, through the course of my activism work, I've managed to acquire many of the old publications. And what's interesting is that Charles Taze Russell wrote a series of books called Studies in the Scriptures. And he started writing them in the late 1800s, and he wrote them through to basically his death in 1916. And the closer he's getting to 1914, he's actually changing the words in the books. Mm-hmm. So this is sounding less and less definite. So as soon as you get to 1900, the words in the books are actually being changed to sound less definite about, what's going to happen in 1914. and then after 1914, they actually even published a Watchtower article where they said, okay, we need to completely change these sentences. And they all applied, and they were all about what was going to happen in 1914. So then, I mentioned Rutherford, who was kind of the David Miscavige of the movement. He came up with his own false prophecy of 1925, and he had some very he had some very eccentric claims about what would happen in 1925. He claimed that just before Armageddon, a host of Bible characters were going to be resurrected. So the likes of Moses and Samson and all of these kind of men of fame from the Old Testament were going to kind of pop out of nowhere, and they were going to start ruling, basically preparing the earth for a global government. And this was all supposed to happen around 1925. Obviously that never happened. But just to kind of explain.
Unless Moses is wandering around somewhere in Fifth Avenue.
Yeah. Well, just to kind of highlight what an eccentric man Rutherford was, he actually had a house built for him in San Diego called Beth Sarim. And maybe because he felt guilty about having his own mansion, he actually had the deeds to the property written so that the property was deeded to the likes of King David and Samson and Moses and all of these Bible characters, because he said when they arrive, they're going to need somewhere to live.
Yeah.
So this is basically their house, and I'm just keeping it warm for them, And that was, it sounds too fantastic to believe, but that's actually what happened.
So, Moses and David and Daniel, they're all living in the suburbs of San Diego.
Yeah, apparently, and he even had like a reporter kind of like question him on it, and he was even saying, well, what will they be wearing? And he said, well, they'll probably be wearing the same clothes that we're wearing today. And this was in the 1930s. So the reporter said, so they're all going to be kind of popping up in high hats and spats and walking canes.
That would make an awesome Netflix series.
It would. But I have to say, I mean, I think people who were alive in the 1930s, bearing in mind what an austere period of history it was, they were really missing out on a fantastic opportunity to lay claim to a mansion, because all they had to do was stick to the story that they were the Bible characters, and they could have had their own mansion. But,
yeah, there you go.
So yeah, there was 1925, and then there was also a few decades later, it was predicted that Armageddon was going to come in 1975. That was very, very tedious explanation as to how that was going to happen, as to why that was a year of significance. And then after 1975, there was the prediction that I was raised with as a young child, which was that there's a scripture in the book of Matthew that says that this generation will not pass away until all these things occur. And the generation that Jesus was speaking about was held to be the generation that witnessed the events of 1914. In other words, was old enough to see what was happening in the year 1914. And said that this generation would not die, would not die out completely until Armageddon, before Armageddon came. So I was raised with that particular prophecy, and needless to say, that got scrapped. And they went through a list of, they went through kind of a series of revisions, and they now have this crazy interpretation where they say, well, that's still the case, but instead of it being just one generation, it's actually an overlapping generation. So the people who were alive in 1914 overlapped with the people who some of whom are still alive today, and that's how it works. So,
jeez.
obviously, if you're going to kind of make two components of a generation, you might as well make 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or however many is convenient to you.
Right.
You know, the word generation quickly loses all significance. So, but that's the current teaching.
So when the end times come, if I understand it right, a fairly small number of, and apparently, I mean, it was kind of amazing to me how specific, number-wise and year-wise Jehovah's are, but only around 144,000, and a very specific number there, people will be resurrected, if I understand it right. Is that accurate? And what happens to the other 7 billion people?
No, that's not it.
That's not it.
No. Well, what it is, when going back to Charles Taze Russell again, when the movement first started, you have to remember it was a very, very small movement. It was just kind of basically a loose-knit kind of grouping of congregations on the eastern seaboard where the movement first sprang up. And at the time, it was understood that if you were a follower of the Bible students, you were going to go to heaven. You know, there was no, when the Bible was talking about Christians, it was talking about Christians who, when they die, were going to go to heaven. And that was basically the official line all the way through to the 1930s, by which point the organization was growing quite quickly. And there were, you know, it was difficult to justify there being only 144,000 being the number in Revelation that is supposed to be in heaven. Most Christian denominations consider that to be a symbolic number, but Jehovah's Witnesses have always considered it to be a literal number. And obviously, when it got to the 1930s and the movement was kind of growing so quickly, it was no longer mathematically feasible for there to be only 144,000 who would kind of make it. So what
it's a lottery.
What Rutherford very cleverly did was he invented what I like to call two-tier Christianity. So he said, well, the 144,000 is actually applying to people who rule in heaven, but they're not just ruling in heaven just for the sake of it. They're going to rule over the earth, and on the earth is going to live the great crowd that's mentioned in Revelation, because in Revelation it talks about a great crowd standing before the throne. And again, if you read the verse in context, it's quite clearly talking about a great crowd standing in heaven, because the very fact that they're before the throne of God, which is in heaven, you know, basically explains itself. But what he said was, well, no, this great crowd is actually all of the people who are going to survive Armageddon, and we don't know how many that's going to be. But it's still not great in terms of the mathematics, because what Jehovah's Witnesses currently believe is that Armageddon is going to come any moment. So it could come tomorrow, it could come next week, but it's certainly going to come very soon. And when Armageddon comes, everybody is going to die who doesn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness. Whether it's men, women, or whether it's even children, they're all going to be massacred. And the survivors of Armageddon are going to be Jehovah's Witnesses, and they are going to live on a world that's basically been cleansed through mass genocide. And they're going to have to spend the rest of eternity praising the maniac who's done this. But you don't think of it in that way when you're a Jehovah's Witness. You just think, you just think, well, you know, Jehovah created us. He can decide who lives and who dies. And surely it's not just as black and white as it has to be, is you've got to be a Jehovah's Witness. Surely if you're just a good person, surely you'll make it through. But the interesting thing is that when you actually wake up from your indoctrination and you study the literature carefully, you realize, no, actually, that's not the case. You can be a good person and still die at Armageddon, because that's the whole point of the preaching work. The reason why witnesses knock on your door is to give you that chance to become a Jehovah's Witness and therefore survive Armageddon. If it was just a case of being a good person, there would be no need to do the preaching work.
Right, yeah, they wouldn't be out proselytizing.
Precisely, you could just have Armageddon and then debrief all the survivors afterwards. It's quite astonishing what you end up believing as a JW.
Yeah, I would say for any religion, but yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other differences between Jehovah's Witness and more mainstream Christian faiths?
Well, most mainstream Christian faiths don't dismantle families because someone stops being a believer. I think that's probably the main thing. And if you speak to most ex-JWs, and you ask them to kind of pinpoint the thing that most upsets them and causes them most distress, it is shunning, and it is the way that family bonds are torn up simply because someone decides to stop being a witness or someone leaves the witnesses. And the irony is that hasn't always been the case for JWs. So, as recently, I say recently, but in relative terms, it is recent. In 1947, there was an Awake article, denouncing excommunication as unscriptural and saying that it was actually a pagan practice, that the Catholic Church was wrongly employing, as a weapon. And then only a few years later in 1952, Watchtower introduced its own form of excommunication. Did a complete U-turn. But even then, that was better than what we have today, because in 1952, you could be disfellowshipped from the witnesses, but you could also, if you wanted to, just say, well, this is no longer for me. Thanks, but no thanks. I'm out. But then in 1981, there was a big upheaval. There was basically a mass paranoia about apostasy, in the Bethel headquarters. That was actually in 1980. And then a year later in 1981, a Watchtower was published. It was actually the September 15th, 1981 Watchtower that changed the rules and said, well, actually, if you do disassociate yourself as a witness, it's just as bad as if you're disfellowshipped. And therefore, people who disassociate themselves should be shunned in just the same way as people who are disfellowshipped. So that's it was literally from 1981 that the door slammed shut, and it was impossible to leave gracefully. So I think shunning, I'm not aware of, for example, the Anglican Church, having that kind of policy. I know with Mormons, it's a little bit more nuanced. So they don't have kind of written instructions.
No.
But you should shun. Yeah, but it's basically something where if you want to find the justification, you can find it reasonably easily. That's how I understand it. So,
so as I understand it, Jehovah's, and correct me if I'm wrong, they are very literal when it comes to the Old Testament. And
yes.
And what are their views on the New Testament? I mean, is accurate to say they believe in Jesus, but they don't believe Jesus was divine. Or you tell me. I mean, what?
Well, and they have their own version of the Bible, right?
Yes and no. They have their own version of the Bible, but they like to pride themselves on it being as accurate as they can make it. However, there are some bits where you can quite clearly see that the wording has been kind of used very prudently in such a way as to support their theology. But basically, yes, they are Bible literalists. They believe in the Genesis account. They believe in the Garden of Eden. They believe in Noah's flood. They believe that Noah's flood was a global flood that covered every last inch of land. They believe in Jesus, but not in the divinity of Jesus. So they don't believe in the Trinity. So they believe that Jesus was it was or is the Son of God and not God himself. But that's basically it, that they believe in a literal interpretation of the Bible.
Hi, this is Justin Schieber, formerly of the Reasonable Doubts podcast and currently of Real A Theology, and you are listening to the Godless Rebelution.
Many people claim to find it impossible to believe or to imagine that they won't exist after death. Just try it for a second. I mean, you imagine that everyone in Paris right now is getting along fine without all of us. I mean, none of us are in Paris. We are really, really materially absent from whatever is going on in every other city on this planet right now. You were absent for all of human history before your birth. The idea that you simply can't imagine not existing after death is really kind of just for lack of trying, I think.
You and the Godless Rebelution will be reassimilated in 3, 2, 1.
You mentioned that they made that change about shunning and disfellowship and disassociation in the 80s, and that they referred to it as a pagan belief, and that reminded me that that Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate a lot of holidays that other people do because they believe that those holidays have pagan roots, right?
Yeah, that's another thing we can pin the blame on Rutherford for, I'm afraid. It was in the Rutherford years. I mean, in the years of Charles Taze Russell, I mean, you name it, Bible students were celebrating it. So they even had books for recording each other's birthdays, and they would celebrate Christmas. And there really was very, not a great deal to differentiate Bible students from just, most Protestant Christians. But when Rutherford took power, and when I say took power, it was really quite dramatic. It was almost like a coup. The way he seized the reins of power at Watchtower following Russell's death. I mean, I write about it in my book, but there was quite a lot of drama involved. And one thing that Rutherford seemed very keen to do very early on was to make the witnesses as different as possible. And one of the ways that was achieved was by, basically prohibiting almost everything. Even beards. I mean, you've probably noticed that when Jehovah's Witnesses call on you, if it's male Jehovah's Witnesses, it's very, very, very unlikely that they're going to have a beard. And that was thanks to Rutherford. And it was also Rutherford it was under Rutherford's presidency that Christmas stopped being celebrated. Birthdays followed soon after that. There was a passage in one of Rutherford's books that denounced Mother's Day because it was glorifying women. He was a huge misogynist and a huge sexist, and he really, really despised women, or he despised women so long as they weren't, in his personal entourage. That basically throughout their history, Jehovah's Witnesses have almost leapt on opportunities to be different or to point to themselves as different. And probably the most grotesque example of that is the prohibition on blood transfusions, which again is a fairly recent thing. I mean, it was 1945 that blood transfusions started being prohibited. And that came off the back of a long list of crackpot kind of medical articles that appeared in the Golden Age, which is one of the Witnesses magazines, where they were complaining about all sorts of things. They were even denying the germ theory of disease in one article. And you name it, they've complained about it, and they forbade organ transplants for a long period as well. But the blood prohibition is, once you kind of wake up from your indoctrination and you learn just how pointless it is. My own theory is that Jehovah's Witnesses will never drop the blood prohibition, because the minute they do, they then make themselves accountable for all the people that have died. which I don't think they're going to want to do. The nearest they've come to dropping the blood prohibition was in 2000 when they said, well, blood is still prohibited, but you can have blood products so long as they're not one of the four main fractions, either red blood cells, white blood cells, plasma, or platelets. As long as it's none of those things, you can have blood products. But
what are the other blood products that there would
like
be besides those?
Plasma?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I mean, for example, hemoglobin makes up quite a substantial percentage of blood. White blood cells make up a tiny percentage, much less than hemoglobin. But because white blood cells can be kind of separated in blood when you spin blood in a centrifuge, they're considered to be like a main fraction of blood, so therefore they're banned. But hemoglobin is basically, if you take a red blood cell and take the wrapper off, you've got hemoglobin. And that's how plentiful hemoglobin is in blood. And it's hemoglobin that does the main job of carrying oxygen throughout the body. But the irony is that red blood cells are banned. But if you could somehow take the wrapper off a red blood cell and just have the use of the hemoglobin, that isn't banned for Jehovah's Witnesses. So that's the kind of...
It's oddly arbitrary.
That's the level of pedantry that we're looking at when you closely examine the blood policy. And it really is ruining lives. I mean, when you're a Jehovah's Witness, you're quite proud of the fact that there are such things as hospital liaison committees, and these are groups of elders who will go into hospitals if there is a stricken Jehovah's Witness. And the idea is that they give encouragement, but how it actually works is that they are basically there to enforce the blood ban and make sure that blood is refused right to the bitter end. And there was a very sad story back in November of a young girl in Canada called Eloise Dupuy. And she actually died not long after giving birth. So her little child is going to grow up without a mother. And Eloise actually had relatives who weren't Jehovah's Witnesses. And they actually drove, I think, 3 hours to come and be with her, but they were denied access because Eloise was basically surrounded by these elders from the hospital liaison committee. And that's kind of the really ugly side of it, because what Jehovah's Witnesses will often say is that it's a personal decision. But I would argue that if it's a personal decision, you shouldn't need elders surrounding the bed of a stricken Jehovah's Witness. It should be left for them to decide.
Well, yeah, and at what age can a child
that's what I was going to say.
Be made responsible for making that decision?
Yeah, well, I actually believe, I mean, there are some quite encouraging stories coming out of judges in different countries, such as New Zealand and Australia, who've actually stepped in and prevented Jehovah's Witness parents from letting their children die. Because, it's one thing for an adult Jehovah's Witness to refuse blood, but it's another thing entirely for a legal minor to be coerced into refusing blood just because that's the religion of their parents.
Yeah, no.
And the encouraging thing is that there are judiciaries that are kind of wise to this, and there are cases of judges stepping in and basically giving doctors permission to force the blood and save the child's life. But in my view, there's still a great deal of work to be done in making sure that it's absolutely impossible for that to happen, because unfortunately it is something that Jehovah's Witnesses take extremely seriously. They consider it to be almost a form of rape for blood to be transfused.
Well, unfortunately, you hear far too many stories here in the States about that as well in regard to children.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask what is behind, or what do they provide as the reasoning behind the prohibition of blood transfusion and organ transfers?
Oh, well, so organs are now allowed. That's kind of been, that was one thing that they were able to successfully, do a U-turn on. But the justification that's given for blood is basically the Mosaic law. In the Old Testament, there were laws given that basically prohibited the use of blood for anything other than sacrifice. So if you killed an animal, the blood had to be poured out on the ground. It wasn't to be used. It wasn't to be eaten. There was no acceptable use of blood other than for sacrificial purposes. And this commandment was kind of carried across to the New Testament in the writings of Paul. Actually, it's in the book of Acts as well, where they say, well, we'd like you to keep abstaining from blood. And of course, when they say, we'd like you to keep abstaining from blood, there's no way in the world they were thinking of blood transfusions.
No, they had no concept of
the
that.
Technology wasn't available, right?
Yeah. Exactly. They were literally just talking about eating the stuff. And the interesting thing is that if you speak to Jews, that there's actually a rabbinic principle. It's called pikuach nefesh, which is basically the understanding that saving life takes priority over following the law. And it was this that, for example, Jesus was reasoning with the religious leaders on when, for example, if he healed someone on the Sabbath, he'd say something like, well, if your bull falls into a pit on the Sabbath, are you really going to leave it there, or are you going to get it out? And it was the principle of pikuach nefesh that he was reasoning on. But Jehovah's Witnesses don't even think about that. They just say, oh, well, if it's talking about blood, then that must also mean blood transfusions. And they are literally the only group. And if you think about Orthodox Jews, I mean, they will kick up a fuss over the slightest thing. You think about the fuss that they might cause, for example, on a plane if they're sat next to a woman or something. They really are keen on following the letter of the law, and yet they will still accept blood transfusions. So it really is outrageous the extent to which, these Bible passages are followed.
So I had a quick question about the holidays really quick, getting back to that. So I'd heard about the ban on the pagan inspired holidays like Christmas and Easter, and also about birthdays. So growing up, do you, as a kid, do you celebrate anything? I mean, is there any kind of religious celebration, or any time you get presents? I mean, what fun is there in being a kid? If I mean, can the tooth fairy leave a coin under your pillow for
worshiping Jesus is all the fun you need, Grant.
Well, I guess it's like with anything. You get used to it,
Sure.
Especially when you're in a community with other Jehovah's Witness families and other Jehovah's Witness children, you don't feel as though you're being deprived, because you're in just exactly the same boat as the other Jehovah's Witness children that you're hanging around with, and they're not getting presents at Christmas either. I will say this, that we had in our family this custom. We used to call it Surprise Day, when we would, at a random day in the year, preferably nowhere around Christmas, we used to just suddenly get surprised when we came home with a load of presents waiting for us. And that was kind of my mum and dad's way of compensating, I guess you could say. But no, there are no religious holidays that are acceptable for Jehovah's Witness kids. In fact, the only celebration, well, there's two celebrations that Jehovah's Witnesses have. One is they celebrate the death of Jesus. They celebrate the Lord's evening meal in their own kind of observance. And they also, curiously, they allow wedding anniversaries. So we always used to celebrate Mum and Dad's wedding anniversary. And that's pretty much the only thing that Jehovah's Witnesses will celebrate.
Okay. So do Jehovah's, you had mentioned about staying in tight-knit communities, do Jehovah's tend to do that? Do they kind of insulate themselves and kind of have like a section of the city where they all buy houses and, kind of just stay together the way, like the Amish or, something like that?
Well, that's the curious thing. I mean, the Amish are kind of famous for, isolating themselves from the world around them. The incredible thing about Jehovah's Witnesses is that they're able to do that without living kind of in close proximity to each other. They are raised to believe that the world is in the grip of Satan, that it's wrong to associate, to socialize with people who aren't Jehovah's Witnesses, and that when you go to work, so you have an office job, you're literally just going there to pick up the paycheck and not to socialize, not to fraternize, because essentially your work colleagues around you, unless you can somehow convince them to start coming to meetings, they're going to die at Armageddon. So what you essentially have with Jehovah's Witnesses is an Amish-like arrangement, but without them living literally in close proximity to each other. They're in the world, but not of the world, so to speak. They coexist with worldly people, but they're to keep themselves very, very separate. And that's actually one of the main reasons why there's such a problem with child abuse, because when a child is molested within the Jehovah's Witness religion, it's just assumed that that's something that the elders need to deal with. So the first instinct of Jehovah's Witness parents won't necessarily be, oh, we need to ring the police. If it's someone within the congregation that's molested a child, the first instinct will be, oh, we need to let the elders know about this. And the elders in turn will want to contact the local headquarters for direction. They won't be thinking, gosh, we need to call the police.
Yeah. That's disgusting. I mean, we see that in the Catholic Church, within the LDS Church. There's a lot of child sex abuse that isn't reported to authorities. I can only imagine that with the Jehovah's Witnesses being in the world but not of the world, yeah, it can only compound that problem, right?
Yeah, and in 2015, in fact, it's an ongoing. I don't know whether you've heard of, in Australia, they're having a royal commission into institutional responses to child sex abuse, and Jehovah's Witnesses are one of the religions that's been given very close scrutiny. And actually, if you read the findings that have been published, it becomes very, very clear that the commission are very, very concerned about the way Jehovah's Witnesses deal with child sex abuse. And a lot of it is because of this kind of very insular kind of culture that they have. And when the Royal Commission first started looking into Jehovah's Witnesses, they were somehow able to order the Australian branch to produce all of their records, because Watchtower keeps records on those who are accused of child abuse, records that are, for the most part, completely beyond the reach of the authorities. But in Australia, they managed to order these records to be produced, and it turned out that between 1950 and 2014, there were 1,006 recorded pedophiles within the Jehovah's Witness religion in Australia alone.
Oh, wow.
And 1,800 victims. So that's the scale of the abuse just in Australia. You can imagine what it must be like if the records were ever to be produced for America.
Well, and those are just the cases that are actually reported to even the church elders, right? I would guess that there are some that aren't. So
yes, yeah. So this is where they've reported back to the branch. Yeah.
Yeah, that's disturbingly high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have one last question for you. Well, maybe a couple, but okay. So going back to the 144,000 who are the elect, who will rule over earth in heaven, versus the great multitude, which will, they get to be, in a sub-heaven kind of thing. They won't be ruling over heaven. Is it, I can imagine that they would make it hard. That's a hard sell to people, right? That I'm already in the church. I'm one of the elect, or, somebody I know is an elect, and we'd like to recruit you to be a lesser being than us.
Not really. It's not really a hard sell because they're not kind of stuck between heaven and that. They get to basically inhabit the cleansed earth. So the way it's sold, I mean, if you look at Jehovah's Witness publications, you'll maybe see them on the stands on the sidewalk. If you flick through and look at the illustrations,
it's all torture porn, man. It really is. Like anytime they leave the copy of the Watchtower or any pamphlets on my door, it's like it's bloody torture porn.
You do have torture porn, but you also have pictures of, very kind of eerily reminiscent of the sort of images that you see in North Korea of this kind of utopia, this kind of idyllic garden scene where there are people basking in, frolicking in fields with, pandas and with wild animals and in paradisaic conditions and tables of fruit and all that kind of thing. And that's basically where everyone else gets to live. So you have the 144,000 who are up in heaven, but they're ruling over this cleansed earth. And so when Jehovah's Witnesses are pitching you their religion, what they're pitching to you is, wouldn't you like to live in a world that's been cleansed of all wickedness? But what they're not saying to you is, when we say cleansed of all wickedness, we mean genocide committed against everybody who's not a Jehovah's Witness. But they won't phrase it like that,
So go ahead, Grant.
Well, one of the numbers I came across today, which kind of surprised me, was that Jehovah's 65% of Jehovah's are women, and I want to know is that accurate? And if so, do you have any explanation of why there's such an imbalance gender wise?
It certainly didn't feel like that when I was a Jehovah's Witness growing up. Honestly, I'm not kind of qualified to say why that is, but okay. I can only tell you that I mean, if we're going to talk about kind of second class roles within the church, as you were mentioning before, it really is a second class role if you're a woman as a Jehovah's Witness.
It doesn't strike me as a very female friendly religion.
It isn't at all. No, you're not allowed. So if you go to a Kingdom Hall and attend one of the meetings, you'll notice that there aren't women on the platform giving sermons. They're not even allowed to operate the sound system or monitor the contributions or hand out literature. They're only allowed. They can do those things sometimes if there's a shortage of men, but if there's a healthy complement of men, they're basically just allowed to do the cleaning and mop the floor and that kind of thing.
Well, that's why the numbers surprised me so much when I came across it. So,
yeah. No, I'm not qualified to say why that
is. Well, as I said before, you've been incredibly generous with your time. I know it's super late there. It's 4:30 in the morning almost.
Yeah, I better have my breakfast soon.
I appreciate you so much staying up late to speak with us and for being so generous with your time. Real quick, if people want to get in touch with you for more information, how can they reach you out on the interwebs?
Probably the easiest thing is to follow me on Twitter. So I'm at Cedars JW Survey is my handle, and basically more or less everything I know about Jehovah's Witnesses is in my book, The Reluctant Apostate, and that's on Amazon. So by all means, check that out.
Excellent. Well, thank you again so much, Lloyd. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thanks so much. Take care, guys.
All right. We'll talk to you. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Hi, this is Yvette Dontremont, aka the Cybabe, and you're listening to Godless Rebelution. You can find me at cybabe.com, at my Twitter account at the Cybabe, and if you've hunt really hard, you can find me at Pornhub. I dare you.
Thank you to everybody who has rated the show on iTunes and Stitcher and are following us on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And to all our Patreon patrons, you make the show possible.
Well, that was a fun interview.
That was amazing. That was, the information. I went in with like some basic kind of information, but yeah.
And what a cool voice he's got.
Oh God, yes, yeah.
Yeah, I really dig his accent.
Eastern
and
European.
He kind of, the way he speaks reminds me of, the author of American Gods, what's that guy's name? He just came, he was here in Utah. He spoke a little while ago. Brilliant author. Shit, now I have to look it up because it's going to drive me nuts.
Oh, now you're going to look something up.
Oh, Neil Gaiman.
Neil Gaiman.
It came to me while I was attempting to look it up. I didn't actually have to do it. But yeah, he's got an awesome voice also.
Does he? Yeah.
We went and listened to him do a reading out of his book. And, there was this little speaking engagement where he did some reading from his book and was up there for an interview.
Oh, nice.
With, now another name is going to fail me. Fucking Radio West guy. Doug Fabrizio.
Oh, Doug Fabrizio. Yeah. Yeah, he's got a good voice.
Best looking guy in radio.
Or so he says.
Apparently that's what everybody says.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Oh, shit. Now I'm going to forget another name. Tracy and I went to go see Dave Sedaris.
Oh, Dave Sedaris.
And Doug Fabrizio came out and introduced him. And Dave Sedaris was like, what a handsome man. He is the best looking man in radio.
Yeah. No, it's great to have that kind of nice lyrical voice. I'm kind of in this like perpetual post-nasal drip kind of voice.
Yeah. A little strained. That's how my voice is feeling tonight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just that smooth, even calm tone with the accent. Yeah. I should have asked him if he has an audio version of his book available and if he read it. Because if so, that would be awesome.
That would be cool.
Anyway, you had a story though.
Find out from Amazon, but
that we didn't get to.
I didn't get to ask because his time was limited, and
I felt bad because there was also apparently some confusion on the difference in time,
the time zones, and
so initially Lloyd thought it was going to be 2:00 his time when we started talking to him. We came down here to record at the time that I told him we would be recording here in Mountain Time, and I saw that I had a message from him in my email inbox that said, hi, this is Lloyd. I don't know if there was a bit of confusion on the time difference, but it's almost 3 here where I am. So he stayed up this whole time to talk to us.
Yeah.
And it was already an hour past when he was expecting that we would be contacting him. Yeah. And then he stayed even longer with us on the phone than
he had
intended. So yeah.
Which was really cool. But on the other hand, it's his fault for living in Croatia. If he would live in the civilized fucking world.
That's what you get, buddy.
That's what you get for living in the middle of nowhere. I actually want to go visit Croatia. It's on my bucket list.
Yeah.
It sounds like a beautiful place.
Well, and he was just such a cool guy, and I really appreciate all the time he spent with us.
Yeah.
I think that was probably the most ignorant I have ever felt during an interview as far as my knowledge of a thing that we're interviewing somebody about.
Yeah. Well, I've heard some of the highlights over the years. The things that are fairly popularly known, the blood transfusions at Christmas.
The holiday thing.
And the weirdness there, and the watchtower and the perpetual Armageddons and things like that. But some of the specifics he got into, especially the dates and the numbers and the meanings of all these things in 1914 and the relevance of that.
Yeah.
That was fascinating.
Yeah. I knew that they had multiple dates on which the Armageddon was supposed to have happened.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there was that many.
Yeah.
And that it stretched back that far.
Well, and the watchtower is fairly famous for the number of failed revelations it's had over the decades. There's this whole Wikipedia page of just all the revelations, all the predictions it's had that just haven't happened.
Shit, one of the questions that I was going to ask him, and I didn't because I forgot to fucking write it down, was as we were talking and he's telling us all of these different dates of Jehovah's Witnesses, their prophecies of the Armageddon not coming true. I was wondering if the Jehovah's Witnesses church teaches that bit of their history. Like, we've had all of these things, they explained away the first one, and they've tried to make justifications for the others. But is this common knowledge among regular worshiping Jehovah's Witnesses, or is this something that they typically find out once they leave the church and start doing a bit of research into its background?
That would be interesting to know. I wish we had asked that. But I would suspect no. I mean, like any religion where the facts, come up and slap you in the face to disprove the religion, they don't admit to that to their members. They sidestep it. They rationalize it. They justify it in one way or the other. I don't think I've ever come across any religion that has been honest about its misinterpretation of the Bible or any theological text.
Well, and I know that we have Jehovah's Witness listeners in the audience because it was a listener of ours, Andrew Vodopich, who initially contacted Lloyd, and Lloyd contacted us to be a guest on the show. So, Andrew, if you can answer any of these questions that we have, that would be great. Or we can send a message out to Lloyd and as a follow-up to have some of these answered.
I would really like to know more about that ratio of men to women. And if that number I found, I just happened to find, I stumbled across it earlier today. If there's any validity to that and why the fuck that would be.
How the fuck
can 2/3 of the Jehovah's be women?
I don't understand why. I mean, there are so many women in any religious denomination that's out there.
There's that.
I mean, I can't think of, certainly none of the Abrahamic faiths are very affirming to women within the church. So that's always been a puzzle for me. That's always been a puzzler and head scratcher for me. It's never made any sense to me.
Yeah.
But I keep stalling or getting sidetracked. What is your Jehovah's Witness story?
So it was like last year. The Jehovah's still come around my house, even though I have the little placard thing saying, don't preach to me. The Mormons have given up on me. They don't come around anymore.
The little placard keeps them away from my door. Like during the winter, Tracy saw them approach the door and then leave, and I went and looked, and I could see their foot tracks come up the path to the front door and stop between 8 and 12 feet away from the door, and then just turn around. So
yeah, and I've had Jehovah's come up and ring the doorbell, and by the time I get to the door, they're walking away. And I'm like, I'm here. Do you need
Wait, come back.
And they point, and I'm thinking they're pointing at my Clinton Kane campaign thing in the front yard. And they're like, no, that. And they're at the placard. But,
at the No Bible Thumpers placard.
The No Bible Thumpers placard. But some of them still come around. And especially like when I'm outside in the summertime and I'm working all that, and they'll just come up and start talking to me. And it was last summer sometime. These two women came around, and I forget what the catalyst was, but women were a lot in the news over a couple of months, women's rights and things like that. And these two women Jehovah's came around, missionaries came around. And it was the only two women missionaries I've ever had. I've never had women Jehovah's come to my door. It's always been men.
I've never had men come to my door. It's always been women. That's weird.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's, and the watchtower they had was all about how much God loved women. It was about proof of God's love for women. And these Jehovah's were unique from a lot of other Jehovah's, because I enjoyed getting into theological discussion with religious people. It's kind of fun for me.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like being preached to where it's a one-way conversation, but when it's a discussion, that's fine.
If only you weren't so ignorant and prideful, then you'd know the truth.
Yeah. So they're kind of telling me about the Watchtower, about God's love for women. I'm like, okay, so So let me ask you this as women. So, in Deuteronomy, it talks about, that when a woman is raped, that, the rapist, that the woman is required to marry the rapist, and the rapist has to pay the father 50 shekels, and she can never leave her attacker.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that factor into God's love of women?
It's a good way to claim all the hot ones, right? You just go around raping them and paying for them.
No shit. And these women looked at me with a straight face and said, "Oh, well, yeah, that does show God's love for women."
Because
I'm like, what?
I can guess at the justification, but did they give you justification
yes,
for it?
Yes, they did. So it was all about, it was a product, they were a product of their times argument. If you consider the time, if a woman had had sex with men, rape or otherwise,
she's damaged goods.
She's damaged goods, and she will never have life. She will never have a family. She will just die an old widow, spinster, all that.
It's God's way of taking care of them.
God loves women so much that he requires the rapist to marry his victim so that she will have a man. And a family in God's eyes and all that throughout her life.
Somebody who fucking raped her.
That
doesn't make any sense.
And I'm sitting here, and so in my head, I'm kind of screaming.
Oh, you mean the guy who fucking raped her?
You. In my head, I'm kind of thinking to myself, do you hear the fucking words coming out of your mouth? But to them, I'm a little bit calmer. I'm like, okay, I hear what you're saying. Now, here's the thing. I'm not God. I understand I'm not God, and God is God, and he has his own rationale. But let's say, for the sake of argument, I were God. Maybe I would show my love for women not by forcing a victim to marry and spend the rest of her life with her attacker. Maybe I would say, rape is a victim is not sullied, is not dirty, is not.
Or maybe you'd step in and stop the guy who's fucking raping her.
You can stop the rapist. Or maybe, there are a dozen different things I could do as God to preserve the dignity of the fucking woman.
Yeah.
Other than force her to marry her attacker. And the two women who were in front of me, I don't even remember what their response was, but it was just kind of incomprehensible. And they just kind of looked at me with these doe eyes like, oh, you just don't understand.
I just shrugged you off.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, if only you knew.
Yeah.
If only you would accept God's love into your heart, then you would understand.
Then I would understand. So, yeah. So that's my most dramatic Jehovah's Witness story. I had these two guys come over once with a little kid, and the kid was so fucking bored. I felt bad for the kid. He was in slacks and a white button-up shirt and a tie, the little pin-on tie that you'd put on
They
kids.
look like Baron Trump.
Clean shaven and everything. Yeah. No, he was so fucking bored, just kind of standing back there fidgeting. Yeah. It's the Jehovah's are fucking. Oh, and the Watchtower. Yeah, it's fucking torture porn. I kind of flipped through. I never read it, but I flipped through it, and it's just disgusting.
I've read. I haven't read the whole goddamn thing because honestly, I'm not interested. But I've thumbed through it and looked at the pictures just on the little flyers or leaflets that they leave behind. And every one of them that I have ever had left on my doorstep is like this bloody. Yeah. It's like the Last Temptation of Christ at the end when he's just bloody and torn to shreds, and it's fucking torture porn.
Well, they're fucking fundamentalists. They're originalists. They're true believers.
Biblical
literalists in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
The most gruesome fucking. People complain about the Quran and all that, but look at the fucking Old Testament. It's the same goddamn thing.
Yeah. Bunch of really horrific shit.
Yeah.
Well, should we move on to our other segments?
Please.
Okay. Let's do it.
My name is Dr. Karen Garst. I am the author of Women Beyond Belief, Discovering Life Without Religion. I also have a blog at www.faithlessfeminist.com. You can find me on Facebook at Faithless Feminist, and Twitter, I'm at Karen_Garst. And you are listening to the Godless Revolution.
If you have questions, comments, concerns, compliments, corrections, criticisms, or concepts for content, contact the show via email at godlessrebelution@gmail.com, by text or voicemail at 330-81-REBEL, or Twitter the Twatter at TGR Podcast. Thank you!
So there's been a whole shit ton of news just in the past couple days, with Trump and the firing of Comey and FBI raids at GOP campaign headquarters. Just a ton. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump has been arrested just since the time we've been sitting down here recording the show.
I mean, they, not indictments, but they issued a bunch of subpoenas for
grand jury subpoenas.
Grand jury subpoenas. And I mean, it's changing on a daily basis.
Oh, yeah. So we'll talk about all of that in just a moment. I wanted to get to a story that listener Brandy Hamrick sent in to us. This comes to us. This is actually a little dated. It's from December of 2014, but it talks about a Texas pastor who says, quote, "Relentless dirty faggots are always trying to rape and snatch your children."
Only in the internet age is a 2.5-year-old story dated.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest.
Oh, I know, right?
Before the internet, 2.5 years wasn't really that long.
Oh, right, yeah.
But nowadays.
And especially in the age of Trump, where it's like news is just being rapid fired at you. Yeah. But the story comes to us from the New Civil Rights Movement. It says, if this newly minted Texas pastor sounds like the Arizona pastor who called for the genocide of gays to end AIDS, there's a reason. By now, you've probably heard of Pastor Steven Anderson of Tempe, Arizona, who earlier this month called for the genocide of all gay people, because that's what a loving, Christ-like person would do.
No doubt.
Claiming it would ensure an AIDS-free nation by Christmas.
Not sure he understands how AIDS works.
Pastor Anderson's words were roundly condemned. The New Civil Rights Movement even asked Dr. Russell Moore, a top religious leader among Southern Baptists, to condemn Anderson's words, and he did. Other local pastors did as well, and last Sunday 100 people protested in front of Anderson's church. As it turns out, Pastor Anderson has been indoctrinating others with his antediluvian thinking. Anderson, Right Wing Watch reports, seems to have found at least one acolyte eager to help him spread his message. In August, Anderson ordained Pastor Donnie Romero, who then established Steadfast Baptist Church in Fort Worth, Texas, where he preached the message last Sunday that all gays should be put to death. In a lengthy sermon, which is excerpted in some video that we are now going to listen to, you'll hear him say some pretty horrific shit.
And now I'm going to explain to you why God wants these people to be put to death. Go to Deuteronomy chapter number 23. Deuteronomy 23. The Word of God is very clear that God is against the Sodomites, that they're filthy, and it says that they're abomination to God. Okay?
Now, typically when religious people refer to anybody as a sodomite, they're talking about gay men having anal sex with each other.
Right.
But really the definition of sodomy is anything other than penis and vagina sex.
Right. Well, and in a very specific position, too.
Does it have to... What?
I thought it was very position-oriented, too. But
sodomy? No, like oral sex is sodomy.
Well, no, I mean, even just vaginal sex. I mean, just regular sex. I mean, like...
Vaginal?
Well, I mean, like doggy style isn't necessarily biblical. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So
you're saying
missionary position is the only acceptable position.
Oh, okay. And other positions you're saying would be considered...
I might be wrong about that. I probably am.
Sodomy? Huh. Possibly. But yeah, that's something that never ceases to bother me when I hear these Christian dipshits talking about sodomites is, dude, I'll bet.
It's not just gays.
Yeah, I'll bet your wife goes down on you and vice versa.
Yeah.
And that's also sodomy, dumbass.
I bet you've spilled your seed on her breast at one point or another.
Given her a pearl necklace a time or two, have you?
Okay, they're an abomination to God. I love that part of the Bible. And
I love that part of the Bible because it's so loving. That's why I love it.
Yeah.
It's not hateful at all.
No. And but that same part of the Bible, God is very clear on, and it might not be Deuteronomy, it might be other books, but very clear on what you're supposed to wear, what you're supposed to eat. I mean,
what crops you can plant in your garden.
No shit. I mean, when was the last time you had lobster, motherfucker? God was very fucking clear on shellfish.
Mm-hmm.
Love that part of the Bible. And I'm going to preach that part of the Bible until the day I die. And if I ever stop preaching that part of the Bible, I hope my kids tell me, Dad, you're going soft on sin. You need to get up there and rip on these queers because it's only getting worse and worse. I'm not going to stop doing it. I'm going to preach it all the time because amen to what Pastor Anderson said. I'm not going to let any of these dirty faggots inside my church.
No, you know what? You know when he's going to stop preaching? You know when he's going to stop preaching that part of the Bible is when he is found out to be gay. When he's found on Grindr, his Grindr account is turned up, and he's found in some motel room with some 16-year-old male prostitute.
This fucking guy, I would hope that he's not teaching his kids to refer to other people as queers and faggots. That's fucking child abuse, man.
Would not surprise me.
These guys, they are all pedophiles. Look in the...
Oh my God! No, they're not!
Hell. Jesus.
Bible, every time it shows the sodomites, in Genesis chapter number 19, in Judges chapter number 19, they're always trying to rape and hurt other people. Right. They're relentless.
The Old Testament is filled with people trying to hurt.
And it's filled with godly people offering up their daughters for rape instead of angels.
And offering up their sons. Fucking Abraham was supposed to kill his son fucking hell.
They are relentless. They are predators, and given an opportunity to snatch one of your children, they would do it in a heartbeat.
I don't even know what to say about a guy like that. He's got to have a Grindr account.
So when Brandy sent her comment when she posted it to the Godless Rebelution page was, for the rage gauge, don't watch it unless you're somewhere you can break things. But I have to watch it in the studio, and
I've got an empty bottle of wine.
I don't want to break anything in here.
But all the walls are padded, so...
It's true. How would we even...
How would I break something in here? It's a plastic table.
Smash it over your head, Grant.
I can break my glasses in half.
That'd teach this guy a lesson.
I break my thumb. It's like, here, this is for you.
Oh, I wish this was your thumb, buddy. I'm gonna fucking break it so hard. No, fucking, I don't understand how religious people can say things like this and think that they are living a loving lifestyle.
I have no idea. Or how they can be so devoid of everything else the Old Testament says, which they completely disregard. I guarantee there's something in the Old Testament that was very specific from God, which he is not doing. Or doing. Or he's wearing polyester or something.
I'm all kinds of mad now though.
Yeah.
I want to pull my beard out with my bare hand.
Well, wait, let me get pictures of that with my spanking new Samsung Galaxy S8.
Oh yeah, you got a fancy new phone.
I got a fancy new phone.
I'm gonna wait for the Note 8.
Yeah, well, I was on a Note 3.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was getting pretty desperate. I was going to do the Note 7.
which was the coolest fucking phone I have ever owned.
It looked like an awesome phone.
It was a great fucking phone.
And just
when the ones that didn't explode.
The ones that didn't explode. I was like right on the verge of doing that, and then the exploding stories started coming out. I'm like, I'll wait.
Yeah, it was the coolest fucking phone I've ever had.
Yeah.
And I got an S7 when I ultimately had to surrender the Note 7, and this thing feels like a piece of garbage compared to the Note 7.
Yeah.
So
I'm
excited for the Note 8.
This feels like I'm going to break it in half. I mean, it's so goddamn delicate.
So there's all kinds of shit about Trump in the news.
Really? Like what?
Of course.
I mean,
well,
is
let's
Trump
see.
doing something?
Just this week, and this is just off the top of my head. I swear to the flying spaghetti monster that I am not looking at any other thing, but he fired James Comey.
Fired Comey, yeah.
The White House released their official reason as to why they fired him.
Multiple.
Trump directly contradicted that.
Exactly.
Directly contradicted all of his surrogates that are going out there and stating the reasons for Comey's firing.
Mm-hmm.
We've had
Comey's replacement contradicted Trump.
Yeah. Comey's replacement contradicted Trump. Trump had the Russian ambassador visit the White House.
Yeah.
This is Kislyak, the one who has been said to be the number one spy recruiter.
Yeah.
And operative in the United States.
And he's
has
behind
this
the whole
fucking
Flynn
guy
thing.
In the White House, in the Oval Office this week, while also barring domestic news sources from being in there and reporting, taking pictures and writing stories about it, but allowing Russian media sources in there to take pictures and report about it, and then getting pissed off when those Russian news sources post photos and videos of Trump smiling and shaking Kislyak's hand. And so there's all of that. There's George Tillerson meeting with another Russian diplomat at the State Department, and this Russian fucko making a joke about James Comey being fired. As they come out for their little photo op, they turn to leave, and you can hear a reporter in the background yelling questions. It sounded like it was Andrea Mitchell. And you can kind of hear somebody in the background. They're like, can you confirm reports about James Comey, something, about his being fired? And this Russian asshole turns back to the cameras and says, James Comey was fired?
Yeah.
And turns back around and walks out. Like, just a total fucking prick about it.
Yeah.
Oh, God, what else?
The reporter who got fired or who got arrested.
Oh, yeah, the reporter who got arrested for laughing during Jeff Sessions' thing, right? Was that it?
Well, so there was a reporter who got arrested for laughing, and then there was a reporter who got arrested for asking a question.
Yeah.
Of not Sessions.
For being so adamant and continuing to ask questions.
He was very aggressive about asking, and not Secretary of State, but the other guy.
Yes, that one.
Yeah, that guy. That guy. You know who I'm talking about.
I know the story you're talking about, but I can't remember who he was trying to ask the question.
And the Capitol Police are claiming he was overly aggressive, and he's saying
he was asking questions so hard. Yeah. We've got Sean Spicer hiding in the fucking bushes to avoid answering questions from anybody.
And now because of that, we have Kellyanne Conway is back.
Ew, gross.
Fucking hell.
We've got that Sarah Huckabee.
Sarah Sanders Huckabee or something?
Sarah Huckabee Sanders, that's the one.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
With her southern drawl.
Oh, God.
Mealy mouth, dough-faced fucking want to punch her because she's just fucking lying, and she knows she's lying. She knows that she's fucking lying.
Yeah. I'm wondering if they're grooming her to be Spicer's replacement.
Oh,
if
Christ, I hope not.
Spicer is on the way out.
Like, Spicer's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
And he don't talk too good.
No, he doesn't.
But at least I've seen him have a sense of humor about things, right?
Sometimes.
The clip of when the New England Patriots were at the White House celebrating their Super Bowl win or whatever, and Gronkowski just peeks into, like sticks his head into the press briefing room while Sean Spicer's up there talking. He's like, "Hey man, you need any help?" And Spicer's had a sense of humor about a couple other things. He'll laugh with the press corps and everything. But oh my God, if Sarah Huckabee Sanders were to become the press secretary, God, I couldn't. There'd be no way I could fucking watch any of it. She's a garbage pile. Yeah. She's a fiery garbage pile human being.
Yeah,
awful. I would break shit in my house if there was a press conference on and she was speaking, because I get really close to having that happen when she's just answering questions about stuff.
Yeah.
I despise her. I dislike her more than Kellyanne Conway.
I have a hard time with that. I'm not sure who I dislike more. Kellyanne is more experienced, and so her bullshit is more nuanced, but it's still obviously bullshit. So
yeah.
I honestly don't know who I think
it's just that fucking,
they're just
that smug fucking look on her face and that southern drawl and her fucking condescending tone. Like, I feel like Brad Pitt in True Romance. For any of you who don't know what movie that is, fucking go and watch it right now. It's my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie. It's a star-studded cast, fucking awesome movie, but Brad Pitt plays this stoner in it. And he has like 2, maybe 3 lines in the whole movie. And one of them is, "Don't fucking condescend to me, man." That's how I feel when I see her up there. I'm like, fucking shut up.
Yeah.
But that's enough rage talking about her. But they did fire James Comey. The official White House response or reason for doing so was that Jeff Sessions and the Deputy Attorney General both recommended that Comey be fired. And initially the reason was because he was unfair to Hillary Clinton.
Hillary fairly.
Yeah, he was unfair to Hillary Clinton. This was the official fucking reason that they initially gave for firing James Comey.
Yeah.
In what
Who the fuck
universe
is
does that make any fucking sense at all?
Who the fuck is going to believe that?
James Comey, and this all stems from Comey coming out during the election season, and
when he testified to Congress in July, or
right, and it was actually this that they referenced as the reason
that they referenced, where he lays out a case for why she should be in jail, but that he's not pressing charges.
Well, that what she did may have broken the law, but that, it wasn't really something that he felt he could prosecute her for because it wasn't.
Which is fucking bullshit anyway.
And it
wasn't any.
Yeah, the whole thing was garbage nonsense, but Trump is saying that him saying those things is what led him to firing him 10 months later, after also praising him during those 10 months.
Praising him a week before he fired him. On Twitter, he was praising Comey 1 week before. But then a few days before, and this had nothing to do with it, a few days before he fired him, Comey decided to ramp up the Russia investigation, put more resources on it, and, according to insiders, he refused to give Trump a definitive response to being totally
sycophantism.
What's the word? he only
loyalty.
Loyalty, and he would not.
Comey wouldn't pledge his loyalty to Trump.
Absolute loyalty to Trump.
Yeah,
and he was ramping up just days before he was fired. He was ramping up the Russia investigation.
Yeah.
But that had nothing to do with it. No. No. It was about the shit from like a year ago.
Yeah. Well, or the reason that they stated for firing him was because of the Clinton thing, and said that it was Jeff Sessions and the Deputy Attorney General who made this recommendation, and Trump was following their recommendation.
Right.
So many problems with that. First, because Jeff Sessions is supposed to be recused from all of these types of things.
Yeah.
Anything that would ever have to do with anything that would touch anything dealing with Trump's ties to Russia, Jeff Sessions said that he was recusing himself from.
Yeah.
He should have absolutely nothing to do with any of that at all.
Yeah.
So for him to make a recommendation to fire Comey when Comey is investigating Trump about Russia stuff, he can't fucking do that if he's recused from having anything at all to do with anything tying Trump to Russia or anything related to Trump's ties to Russia.
Yeah.
So he can't fucking do that.
No.
And then Trump comes out and says, oh, no, well, I was going to fire him anyway.
Yeah.
You know, oh, the letter says this, but, you know, that's no. You know, yeah, they made the recommendation, but I was going to fire him anyway.
Yeah. But he refuses to say, he doesn't really say why he was going to fire him outside of any justification that was in the recommendation to begin with. So why the fuck do you need the recommendation at all?
Yeah. Yeah, why would he have to wait for a recommendation from an attorney general who is supposed to be recused from anything having to do with this?
Yeah.
And
he just happened to fire him for the same reason that's in the recommendation. That's not coincidental or anything.
And this is 10 months after the incident that they cited for the reason for firing him.
And what, 100?
So they kept him around for almost a whole fucking year after doing something that they considered to be a fireable offense?
To be fair, he didn't take office until January. But 110 days into his presidency, 110, 115?
Yeah.
Into his presidency, and he kept him around that whole time. And he was praising him on Twitter a week ago.
It's bullshit. None of the reasons that the White House has provided, whether it was the initial reason that they gave after the firing, or any of the myriad reasons or attempts to justify the firing that they've offered since then, hold any fucking water at all.
It's all bullshit. A poll came out today that something like 48% of Americans realize, I mean, they know Comey was fired because of Russia, because of the Russia investigation.
And then today we've had the FBI raiding GOP campaign headquarters in Annapolis, Maryland. Presumably, so the story that I'm getting is that the GOP and several high-ranking members within the GOP are all complicit in a money laundering scheme for Russia, for Russian interests. For Vladimir Putin and the other well-to-do Russians who are using their powerful and rich political connections here in the United States to launder money.
I hadn't even heard that one, so yeah. This is fucking Nixon. I mean, you've heard all the pundits saying, they're all history majors now. They're all, I don't think I could say anything that they haven't said. I mean, but this is Nixon all over again. I mean, this is the timeline. It's all lining up with exactly what happened in the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm. How do you think he's going to be removed from office?
After him being elected, I kind of gave up predicting anything. I don't see him lasting a whole term. And
I don't see him lasting through the end of this year.
The bookmakers and all the, they're all saying it. Everyone's saying it. I don't know if he's going to be removed. If I were to make a prediction, I don't think he's going to be removed. I think he's going to quit. I think he's going to resign before he's removed. And he will come out and say, what he's probably going to do is say,
media's totally unfair. It's all lies.
He's going to get in there and say, I got in there. I got America back on the right track. I signed a whole bunch of executive orders that got America back on the right track. My job is done. I'm going to go on to my own life now and let what's his name, Pence, just kind of take the ball from here. because I've set the stage for making America great again.
I accomplished in less than a year what every other president hasn't even been able to accomplish in 8 years or more. I put America on the right course. Everything is wonderful now. I made America great again. Peace out, bitches. I'm gonna go play golf.
I really don't see him making a full term, but I didn't see him being elected either. So I don't know how much.
You know what I would love to see?
Yeah,
is his orange ass behind bars.
God, oh fuck yes!
Wouldn't that be amazing?
That would be amazing.
I'd be so happy.
Yeah,
it would make his election and however many months until he is behind bars worth it.
Yeah, it would be. It would be so. I would celebrate that day. Oh,
I mean, God. Nixon broke the fucking law and was not arrested.
Everyone around him was.
Yeah.
And they were all pardoned afterwards, but, fuck that.
But so some of the stories that I've been reading today are all about how, what the information that the FBI has intercepted because of their surveillance of these Russian diplomats, right? They know that Flynn broke the law and was meeting with Kislyak.
Right.
And that in their surveillance of these Russian diplomats, they have the Russian diplomats talking to several different Trump surrogates and then talking about several different Trump surrogates and what is going on. And so there are audio tapes and video that are completely damning that will eventually come to light, and I will listen to them with headphones on at full blast with a shit-eating grin on my face while masturbating.
I was going to say, up until you said masturbating, I was going to say you should throw a party.
Oh,
we should just
I'll throw a party anyway.
And masturbate. It's like, fuck that. My friends will understand.
We're all friends here, right? Come on, it's great. It's great.
Well, I'll just stand around and applaud.
You've been to several parties at my house.
I've been to.
You know how they get.
I've seen you do wrecking ball. I know how it works. You said eventually, and that's one key thing to remember, I think. Although I'm reticent to make predictions, the reality is we are in the second inning here. It's all this shit. I mean, as much as we want this to happen tomorrow, and we keep opening up CNN, hoping that their big headline is Trump being impeached. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next week. It's we're in the second inning of a long game. We're watching a slow train wreck. The train wreck is going to happen, but it's not going to happen anytime really soon. It might happen within the year, but it's not going to happen within days or weeks.
Right around Giftsmas.
Oh, that would be, what a fucking present that would be.
It'd be lovely.
That's my prediction, is that it may and will happen, but not anytime soon.
If you had to hazard a guess on a time.
Oh, shit. I don't know. At the rate things are coming out now, I mean, within 12 months wouldn't surprise. It would not surprise me. But, again, everything about this season has surprised me. So
we're only what, halfway through the fifth month of him being in office.
But on the other hand, I mean, you have Chaffetz coming out now saying we should look into Comey's firing.
That was a
bullshit politics.
Oh yeah,
he's trying to solidify his run for governor of Utah.
Yeah,
and to say he was strong against Trump.
Yeah, if you'll remember, people, I thought that we should look at this way back when.
On his way out the fucking door when he didn't actually do anything.
Yeah, and he's not calling for a separate investigation.
No.
He's not calling for a separate probe, anything like that. He's saying, oh, hey, while you're looking at Hillary's emails for the umpteenth time, just why don't you also check on Comey's, being fired.
But you do
just as part of what you're doing now.
You do have some Republicans. You have McCain calling for independent investigation, which would be great. I would not be surprised at all if an independent investigation got fired up. But those, as much as I want to see one, and as good as I think that would be, those are painfully slow. I mean, the independent investigation of Clinton back in the 90s, it took over a year for them to kind of go through their whole bullshit. So it's going to be a slow process.
Yeah.
To really put all these fucking pieces together.
Too slow for me, for sure.
Too slow for me. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that about wraps it up for this evening show. We're out of time for the regular part of the show.
Okay.
Before we go, I wanted to really quick read a message that we received from a listener who used the pseudonym of Tony Brock. He says, "Hey guys, I'm sort of a new listener to your podcast. I was told about it a couple weeks ago and have been listening to it ever since. I was excited to hear about your upcoming episode on Jehovah's Witnesses. I always fuck that up. Jehovah's Witness, Jehovah's Witnesses. There's too many.
What's the
there's
plural
too many
of that?
S's in
How
there.
do you in that dictionary of terms for plural groups of, like, you know, there's like the plural group of ducks. And
Jehovah Witness.
Jehovah. How do you
Jehovah's Witness?
What's a gaggle of Jehovah's Witnesses?
It's a juggalo, isn't it?
A juggalo of witnesses. You should go out on Urban Dictionary and juggalo.
It's not a gaggle, it's a juggalo of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
His email continues and says, "Not because I am interested in hearing about JWs, but because I am one. Well, technically, in fact, I am still an elder in my congregation. I am, quote, trapped, so to speak, as I have a wife, stepdaughter, and a young son, all of whom I stand to possibly lose when I leave. I've been an atheist in hiding for almost 3 months now, and you can't imagine the emotional strain this puts on me at times. That's gotta be rough."
Yeah, no doubt. I feel for you, man.
He continues and says, I'm sure you will find out all you need to know from Lloyd, as he is currently the most well-versed and knowledgeable ex-JW activist. But if you have any other questions for the show, I'd be happy to help out.
Hey!
Yeah, we can send all those questions.
We
to
have
Tony.
a question for you.
So, Tony, actually, if you would send us a message replying to those questions that we had, that would be fucking amazing.
No shit. Yeah.
That would be great. That would be so awesome and helpful. I would very much appreciate that. And I am so sorry to hear about your current situation, man. I know that's got to be really rough. One of the resources that I would definitely recommend, besides Lloyd and the JW survey, is Recovering from Religion.
Oh yeah.
There's Recovering from Religion and shit. What is the other one? For clergy people who are still in the service but no longer believe.
As soon as you say the name, I'll know what you're saying. But yeah, I don't know.
God damn it! I had a real problem. I've had a really hard time with names tonight, and I'm sure it'll
too much chili.
Yeah, just like Alex Jones. I can't remember my kids' teachers' names because I've had too much chili. No, I will. When I think about it, I will make sure that I post it out on the Godless Rebelution Facebook page, and whenever I remember the name of it.
But seriously, good luck to you, man. I hope you can find your way, find a solution here, because it's rough.
Yeah,
I'm sorry about
and
that.
if there is anything that we can do to help you out, please don't hesitate to let us know. If it's putting you in touch with other resources that I can't fucking remember the name of, or anything else, emotional support.
That's how much help we're going to be.
Yeah, there's this thing. I can't remember the name of it, but fuck, I feel sorry for you, bro.
Contact us and we'll tell you, hey, well, if you Google support for people leaving religion, there's a lot of, because you may not have thought about doing that.
But
I'm sorry.
But seriously, thank you very much for the message. And I do absolutely feel for the situation that you're in. That's got to be rough. I can't, never being a very fast and firm believer myself, I can't imagine once being a firm believer to the point of leading a congregation and then losing my faith and not knowing what to do with myself.
Yeah.
That's got to be a tough spot, particularly in the Jehovah's Witness faith where he could face banishment and shunning and yeah.
Yeah, and the family he's talking about.
Yeah, and losing them.
And the consequences of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Real quick before we go, I also want to thank all of our Patreon subscribers. I want to thank Christy Kalbach, Andrew Vodopich, Jefferson, Mo Cowbell, Wes Aaron, Utah Outcasts, Andy Faulkner, Angelica Pearson, Jeremy Goodson, Brandy Hamrick, Taylor Grin, Grant Larimer. Who's that? I'll bet he's a tall, bald guy who wears purple all the time.
Am I still paying for that? I thought I cut all those subscriptions to pay for the fucking wedding.
Well, you did. You kept the one that was really good.
I kept the one.
Savadakuna and the Gaytheist. Thank you all very, very much. If you would like to subscribe as well to get extra goodies and extended episodes of the show, you can do so by going to patreon.com/GodlessRebelution. Until next time.
It's really easy.
And
if I may, just really quick, I want to give a shout out to my daughter, who does not listen, probably. I doubt she listens. But last weekend, she graduated, a bachelor's in biology from Utah State, and she worked her ass off getting that. So
awesome.
2 thumbs up to her for that, if she ever listens.
So there's a new thing we're doing.
Yes.
I'm going to read this one, and then you're going to read this one.
Oh, okay.
And then I'll read the one that Matt has taped to his boom stand over here.
Oh, okay.
So you'll read that one. Okay. I'm going to read this one. You ready? So until next time, be sure that you crucify that like button.
And leave a review to achieve nirvana.
Rate the show 5 times a day toward Mecca. There we go.
Toward Mecca.
Toward Mecca.
How do you rate toward Mecca?
They'll figure it out.
I've never seen.
We have smart listeners, Grant. They'll figure that shit out.
I've never seen a directional thing in the rating thing.
All right.
Do you just point the stars?
Let's move over to the Patreon stuff. Okay. And for everybody else, bye-bye.
Bye. Let's do this thing here now.
we gonna do this thing right now.
Right now,
Get down, gonna do this thing. Yeah. Maybe this time I'll pull my head out of my ass.
This is what we patrons pay for. Is your fuck ups. It's what makes us laugh in the middle of the day.
Ah, shit, you know what I didn't do?
I have been, go ahead. No.
I have been, no, go ahead.
Sorry.